Bullshit.
Did not.
I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hi, everybody. My name's Kayle. I am your professor of Tommy Wiseau impressions.
Yes, and I am your student, Jaryn. Your learner of Tommy Wiseau
Of Tommy Wiseau impressions. See, I haven't actually seen The Room, but you watched it today.
I watched it today.
So, yeah.
At work, when I was supposed to be working.
That's like the ultimate dream, though, isn't it? Just to watch The Room while you're supposed to be working.
Yes, it was. It was the greatest time I've ever had at that job.
It was the best time you've ever had.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. This is the Bronze Metalist podcast, where every week I assign Jaryn some homework. The homework is a particular metal album. We're in the middle of Death Metal December this month. All month long, I'm having Jaryn listen to different death metal albums. Today's album is Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation. But, we'll get to that later. We got some more talking to do. Jaryn, you wrote me a letter here?
I did, a Merry Christmas
a Christmas
letter.
card? There's a scissors over there on the counter if you want to hand that to me. So I can open it up. We're doing the best audio content in the world, unboxing.
Yes, unboxing.
Or unlettering, I guess.
Prepare to feast your ears on this.
Let's do some ASMR. Just.
Oh yeah. ASMR.
I'm just right now. I'm I can't.
I'm cutting into this.
No, that's way too gravelly. Oh. You can't be that gravelly for ASMR. Okay, I finally got the fucking thing open.
All right.
Ooh, it's pretty.
It's Christmas. It'll get glitter everywhere.
Oh yeah, thank you, dude. Oh, I saw the thing at the bottom and it made me very happy, but I got to read it off. So, dear Kayle, dear Casey, dear Casey, I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you for being a cool dude. Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you for being awesome. You're welcome. Thank you for being that awesome voice. I mean, you're welcome.
Welcome.
But most of all, thank you for being my friend. I appreciate the fact that I have someone I can be weird with. Whenever we hang out, it's a good time. I love doing the podcast with you. It's always fun. But enough of that fluffy crap. Guns are cool, am I right? They are. I like guns.
Yes.
Football and such. Okay, I'm not. Yeah,
That was like the man part.
Yeah, you followed up with manly things
yes.
without emotion. So
yeah.
The football part is I can't relate to that
it's
one
a
so much.
Beyond.
Merry Christmas, Kayle. And then also at the bottom it says, P.S. It's always Wednesday, my dude. Ah!
With a nice little drawing of a frog.
Of a frog screaming. That looks great on the waveforms.
I'm
and
sure
that was a very nice letter. Thank you. It was also a very nice letter. So thank you, Jaryn. What else? What else is going on? Oh, some metal news to talk about. Something that's relevant to this podcast that we do. If you didn't know, Code Orange, which is a really cool metalcore, metallic hardcore band. I'd say metallic hardcore because they're more along those lines. There's a lot of crossover of their fan base with Converge. But they're a newer band. They started in like 2007 when they were all like 15 or some shit like that. They used to be called Code Orange Kids. Their newest album, Forever, was nominated, or a song off of it was nominated for a Grammy, which is really cool. And I thought that was cool news. So on our Twitter account that we have for the podcast, I decided to retweet that. And they retweeted us back. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool. So if we have any fans of them listening,
yeah, any fans of Code
that,
Orange that discovered us because of that, hello. I don't know how many of those there are.
Hopefully
but,
a lot.
Yeah, hopefully millions.
It's not always mushy letters at the beginning of these things.
Yeah, we promise. We'll talk about death metal here pretty soon. Let's just talk about death metal now. We both listened to, you for the first time, listened to Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation, which is an American death metal band. They've been around since 1989, I believe. They're still going strong. They took a hiatus.
Is it something that they thought they were going to be done forever, or was it an actual hiatus where the band doesn't just quit?
I'm not entirely sure. I think at the time they probably thought it was it, just because they'd been around since '89.
Yeah, that's a long time.
It's a long time to be in a death metal band. You look at Converge, which isn't death metal, but they've been around for 27 years now, so it's like,
yeah,
it's crazy. But No, Suffocation is an American death metal band. They're from... Let me look it up. Like I said, I didn't write a lot of notes today. I was very tired. We're coming up on finals week. We've had all kinds of assignments that have happened to us young college kids.
It's absolutely crazy, so forgive us.
I was wrong. They were formed in 1988.
88.
In Center Reach, New York. They currently consist of the vocalist Frank Mullen, lead guitarist Terrence Hobbs, bassist Derek Boyer, and rhythm guitarist Charlie Arago. A couple of those people weren't there on the album that I had you listen to at the time. Their drummer was Mike Smith. Their rhythm guitarist was Guy Marchese. And a really interesting thing about death metal at that time, and really death metal today, is it is very much a white guy thing. You don't see a lot of black death metal musicians, and yet you've got Suffocation, which was one of the biggest early death metal bands, of that late 80s, early 90s era. And both Mike Smith, who is the drummer, and Terrence Hobbs, who is still the guitarist, they're both African Americans. And apparently when they met and they started the band, Hobbs said, quote, "That's where I first noticed, wow, there's another black guy playing this kind of stuff." Because at the time, even less than today, where you don't see a whole lot of African Americans playing metal of any sort, you've got two guys in this, very underground death metal project at the time. Yeah, it's very interesting. So Effigy of the Forgotten is the debut full-length album from them. It was the first full-length album. They put out a couple of EPs and tracks and stuff like that. Some songs that appeared earlier were Cremation and Involuntary Slaughter, which came off of one of their demo tapes, and Infecting the Crypts and Mass Obliteration, as well as Jesus Wept, appeared on their EP called Human Waste. The album is kind of a landmark in death metal because it's considered to be one of the first big albums by a bigger band, or what would become a bigger band in the years to come, that tends to have a very sophisticated level of technicality to it. What we would call technical death metal didn't really exist.
Yeah.
There was, some death metal that sounded more like grindcore. There was some death metal that sounded more like black metal, but and a lot of death metal that sounded just kind of like a heavier version of thrash metal. But this album kind of laid a blueprint for a lot of years to come of what the style of death metal was going to be. And an interesting thing, kind of a sign of things to come, this is one of the first big appearances outside of his original band that you find Corpse Grinder, George Fisher, who would go on to become the vocalist for Cannibal Corpse, which is now the most popular death metal band in the world. And they became that under him as their vocalist after he replaced Chris Barnes. He shows up on two songs on this album, Cremation and Mass Obliteration. And those are two of the songs where you can, if you hear some vocals that it's like, wow, I can actually understand those. It's like, whoa, who's saying that? I can understand those. That was Corpse Grinder. Okay. That was George Fisher that did that. Generally, Frank Mullen's vocals are a lot more intelligible. I listened to their newest album a couple days ago, and he still had that very deep guttural sound, but his vocals were way more intelligible than they are on this record. And I would chalk that up to just production, because generally he opens his mouth very wide when he's screaming to try and enunciate, or doing his death growl to enunciate better. But on this album, it was really tough to understand any of the lyrics at all. And that's me with a lot of experience with this sort of thing. But Jaryn, you don't have a lot of experience with death metal. Last week was your first death metal album at all. So now that you've got that under your belt, what did you think of Effigy of the Forgotten?
I liked this one. It was still that like death metal sound, I guess. I'm kind of being able to discern now.
Yeah.
What's what, but it was that sound, but it was like loud, and I guess I don't know how to phrase this. It was loud, but it wasn't like give you a headache loud. It was just like an intense sounding music.
It's very dense.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed this album. I listened to it while I wrote some papers.
Oh, and wow. How did those papers end up?
I had to make sure that the music wasn't influencing anything that I was writing.
Yep.
The Seeds of the Suffering, that was one that I was going to point out. There's I don't know if you'd call it a breakdown or what you'd call it, but it just
I would. Suffocation is one of the first death metal bands to use breakdowns.
Yeah,
so.
I assume I'm correct in my head thinking what a breakdown is, but that happened. I was like, ooh, I'm really digging this.
Like a really chuggy, kind of slower part that just kind of slams and it breaks down.
Yeah.
And so the drums are slower and the guitar is slower and it's really emphatic. Yes, that is a breakdown.
Okay.
Or at least that's the best definition of one that I can give you without being a music major.
Yeah.
But Suffocation, that's one of the things that they're most known for in the death metal community, is being one of the first death metal bands to use breakdowns, and sort of laying the groundwork for deathcore as a genre and as a separate genre of music in general. Because now, like deathcore, it's very easy to discriminate.
Yeah.
Discriminate might be an appropriate word, because a lot of people who like classic death metal really don't care for deathcore. Because there's a lot of really young guys in deathcore. There's a lot of what is perceived as being a really douchey culture, and that's something that I have not experienced as a guy who's listened to a lot of deathcore in his time and been to a few deathcore shows and that sort of thing. I think there's no more douchiness in the fan base, at the very least. I can't say the same for the singers or anything, but I can't say that for any of those communities, but they were one of the bands that laid the groundwork for deathcore. Okay.
It's cool how just learning everything's jumping off the back of each other.
Yeah.
Like nothing was just established, which I guess makes sense, but nothing was just established for the sake of that.
Yep.
It was somebody would play a certain sound and somebody's like, I like that, and they elaborated on it and built off of that.
Or people will get an idea, say hey, what if we play Slayer riffs, but with a different guitar tone and heavier, and make it sound a different way.
Yeah.
And you get people with all these different influences. Metal started out as blues rock, because you would have those slower passages of blues rock songs, and they just decided to dial up the volume a little bit. I'm not a metal. I'm not a music historian, so I'm talking out of my ass a little bit here. I'm always talking out of my ass.
Yeah, I think as a broadcasting person, that's something you have to be able to do.
Yeah, it's part of my job, is being able to talk out of my ass a little bit. Deathcore is an interesting genre, and I'll definitely have you listen to a few of my favorite albums from that. There are a lot of mediocre deathcore bands out there. Not that there aren't mediocre bands of any other genre, but it seems like the bar for mediocrity there is at a different level than a lot of other genres. But there's a lot of really good stuff going on there too. A lot of really cool stuff. A lot of fun stuff. Deathcore shows are really fun. That's the thing. The mosh pits are some of the most intense and most fun, and I like it.
Yeah.
And I like standard death metal, and I like metalcore, and I like post rock, and I like all this stuff. If it sounds interesting, we keep on coming back to that.
Yeah.
If something sounds interesting, I'll like it.
Yeah.
So some other things about Suffocation. So Suffocation, their next album after Effigy of the Forgotten was Breeding the Spawn, which was released in 1993. I haven't read too much into it, but I think Breeding the Spawn kind of has a sort of bad reputation, because I don't know if they just didn't have the budget for it, but apparently the production on that was not great. And you think, the next album should have better production.
Yeah.
Right? Apparently they kind of regressed. Smith left the band for the first time. Mike Smith, the drummer, left the band for the first time. He would come back later. They apparently decided to split up or go on hiatus at some point in the early 2000s. And then Mullen and Terrence Hobbs got back together with Mike Smith and get most of the original crew back together for a bunch of new albums. And then most recently, they've had a couple lineup changes. In 2013, Frank Mullen announced that he wasn't going to be touring full-time with them anymore. He's still their vocalist and still records their albums, but he's not, touring full-time. So they've got vocalists like John Gallagher from Dying Fetus to fill in for him, and Kevin Muller, who's from a band called The Merciless Concept, Their most recent album is Of the Dark Light, came out on June 9th, 2017. It's pretty good. It's really interesting to hear the progression from Effigy of the Forgotten to how they sound now, because death metal at that time had such a distinct sound. There is a warmth to it, almost to the fuzz on the guitars, to the way the distortion on the guitars work. There's this comfortable wall of sound that is kind of fuzzy. It's almost kind of fluffy, which sounds weird when you're dealing with a sound that is at its core so abrasive.
Yeah.
But there's kind of this, I would consider it to be a comfortable fuzz to it. And then you listen to what is now a technical death metal band like Suffocation, and the guitars sound so much cleaner. The vocals are so much clearer. Just hearing that progression is so interesting to me. And then you listen to a band like Cannibal Corpse, and Cannibal Corpse has a new album out as well. I'm not a huge Cannibal Corpse fan, so I haven't checked it out. But their sound, I've listened to the album preceding this new one, and their sound seems to not have changed as much, or at least the way that their sound is produced. Mm-hmm. It's still a lot clearer and a lot more well-defined, but it still seems like this comfortable wall of sound to it that Suffocation kind of doesn't have.
And is that a product of them just getting better equipment, and then it just kind of like that was something that they had for the equipment, and then they dropped it when they got better stuff?
Or I'm not sure if it's them having better equipment, but it's, music studios having better equipment as time has gone on, and having digital production tools rather than having it all be analog. Mm-hmm. And obviously, yes, they have new guitars, new guitar pedals. Pedals is probably the biggest thing. New amps. Amps have gotten better over time. It's a lot of things. Production has gotten cheaper. It's a lot cheaper now, I imagine, to make a really good sounding death metal album than it was in 1991.
Yeah.
Because now the labor, it seems to be a lot less, because you do have these digital tools to make something that sounds really clean and really nice. You don't have to try and get everything in one take, and it's not a problem to redo a particular sort of part of a song. You can just go into Apple Pro Tools and change things up, and it's not that big of a deal. And it doesn't cost you that much more money and that much more time with your sound engineer. All of those things contribute to a better sound, which is controversial in itself. That better sound is kind of a controversial thing in metal as a whole, because for some people, that fuzz and that lo-fi quality is what makes metal.
Yeah.
That it doesn't sound accessible, that it doesn't sound clean and organized. That's a really big deal for black metal. Or hi-fi black metal is looked down upon by a lot of really committed black metal fans. Yeah. Those are the guys that you'll see walking around wearing their corpse paint, and they've got spiked collars and spiked wristbands and stuff on. Those really committed black metal fans, they don't want something that sounds clean and something that sounds well produced. They want something that sounds like it was recorded in Lars's basement on a $100 mixer. Because to them, that's what makes it.
Yeah, and I think with radio dramas and stuff like that, way back when they just you didn't have TV, so you listened to the radio. Part of the nostalgia and the fun of listening to those is the crackling of just the static.
Imagining how they got all that done too.
Yeah, and that's the fun part. So I still, radio dramas are still fun to listen to, but that old nostalgia of the crackly and I don't know, it's just part of it.
Yeah. What astounds me about the way that producing music used to work is, because I can kind of wrap my head around the way editing used to work for movies before you had electronic editing software and hardware, is that you would have your film and you would literally cut it. You would literally cut it with a razor on a particular frame on this reel, and then attach it to another one and splicing it together, and imagining how special effects worked, and trying to do practical special effects that I get that.
Yeah.
Like if you have a matte painting in the background, or you have a rear projection, or you've got, all this practical effects, explosions going on, I get that. But like trying to have, I was thinking about it the other day, trying to have like a graphic or something come up, like how does that work on an old movie?
Yeah.
I don't know. So for music, I don't know how that works either. I've seen a tour of Kurt Ballou, who is the guitarist for Converge. We talked about and he's got his own sound studio. Actually, he produced Code Orange's new album. He's produced, I think, most of their albums, actually.
Okay.
He produces a ton of stuff. And he still has, at God City Studios, he still has a all analog mixer or whatever. I can't remember what the term for it is.
Yeah.
Because I just don't have that vocabulary. I can't wrap my head around how do you mix and edit music in an analog format.
Yeah, and is that the only thing he has? Like he doesn't have any digital?
He has Pro Tools and all that stuff. But like he has that if bands want it, because some bands do. They're like, yeah, I want to do all analog.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know how you do that. And really, at a certain point, what it is bands would just play a full live set and just have that be recorded on the thing. There wasn't mixing.
Yeah.
You didn't have to mix tracks together. They would just play the whole thing live in studio and be mic'd up and, have a couple goes at it and try and get the best take.
Mm-hmm.
And that's got to be what a couple older death metal bands and stuff like that did. I need to look more at the history of how metal was produced.
Yeah.
Because that's something I'm not completely familiar with. Because if you're trying to record a bluegrass band all in one go, that's not so hard, because pretty much all of their equipment is not electronic in any sense. There's nothing to plug in. Guy's got his banjo, guy's got his fiddle, person on a drum, and then an upright bass.
Yeah.
And you mic those up appropriately, and you don't need digital tools to mix it together. You might still do that because you can get a better sound when you're not recording 5 things at once.
Yeah.
But when you've got electric guitars and bass guitars and vocalists, and it's all so loud, how do you do that without mixing? I don't understand.
Yeah.
And I don't know when electronic tools for audio engineering came in and became standard, because digital editing tools for film came in earlier, like in the like the early 90s, I think. You started having not entirely digital, but electronic systems that could cut the film for you and stuff like that and show you on a screen, and you could do it in a computer, as far as I know. Again, it's a vocabulary I don't have, and it's a part of history that I don't understand quite as well.
It'd be fun to take just like a class on just that.
Yeah, and just like have a class on not even the history of it, but learning how to do it.
Yeah.
It'd be tough, but it'd be cool.
Yeah, there was a film, I don't remember. It's one of like the first ever films. Anyway, it's in black and white, and this guy, I guess it's kind of orange because of the film, but like this guy went
had
through,
that sepia filter on
it. The director went through and like penciled in, like there's gunshots.
Oh wow.
And he would like pencil
drew
in,
them in
like with a colored crayon on each individual frame that there's like a gunshot, so that there was like little bits of like color and stuff when it could get there.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's like the amount of dedication, because now you just click 3 things on After Effects or whatever, and boom, you have it there.
And you have your effect, or you have blanks in your gun.
Yeah,
I think that was more common, having practical effects. This has become a movie podcast all of a sudden. But like this album, Effigy of the Forgotten, came out at a the pivotal moment in the history of death metal, where there wasn't really a blueprint of what does a death metal band sound like.
Mm-hmm.
And then Suffocation comes along, and people listen to this album, and after that, it's kind of clear. It's like, that's what death metal sounds like. It sounds like this. It is foreboding. It is violent sounding. But it's not like doom metal, where it's slow, or sludge metal, which is sludgy. It's got to be kind of fast, or it's got to be fast and then it's got to slow way down and have some sort of a breakdown to it, and then it's got to speed up again. And they really laid a blueprint, I think, For me, I don't get floored when I listen to Effigy of the Forgotten, because for me, that sound is around me every day. Like I can listen to elements of that in half the music that I listen to, but a better version of it.
Yeah.
Because it came later. So when I listen to Effigy of the Forgotten, it's like, yeah, it's good, but I could listen to something better. Which is tough for me because I've always had a bit of trouble appreciating the classics of any kind of art form because I want something that's developed.
Yeah.
Or if it's not developed, I want something that is out there, something that has elements that didn't inspire a whole bunch of stuff. Like Jane Doe by Converge is an absolutely pivotal album and it inspired a ton of people. But I can still listen to that album 17 years later and hear things on that I personally haven't heard on other metalcore records that have come out since then. Or at least things that don't sound as good as when Converge did it. And when I listen to old death metal, for a lot of those bands, having those really, really creative and wacky and sort of avant-garde aspects didn't come around for, quite some time. The last album of this month is going to be exactly that. It's going to be Obscura from 1998 by Gorguts. And I'm really interested to see what you think of that one. I will say before we get to that it's not an album that I like.
Okay.
I don't dislike the album, but it is not an album that I can just sit down and listen to and go like, yeah, okay, this is fun.
Yeah.
If I put on Obscura, I'm going to go, God, I just don't get it. Like, this sounds cool. There are some things that I'm familiar with, but man, I don't get it. And that's not the case with Suffocation. That's not the case with next week. For all of you out there that would like to listen along, I'm having Jaryn listen to the Anthropocene Extinction by Cattle Decapitation. They are a death grind band from San Diego, or just a regular death metal band if you want to call them that. They are fantastic. They are one of my favorite bands ever, of all time. I am really excited to have you listen to it. This is probably the most excited I've been to have you listen to any album so far.
How do you say the title?
The Anthropocene Extinction.
Anthropocene.
So right now we're in the, like, if you think of like the Pleistocene, which is like the Ice Age. The Anthropocene is a proposed era of human effect on the environment.
Oh, okay.
We'll talk more about that later, because next week is also one of the first albums that has a very consistent theme throughout. Not a story necessarily. We will listen to some albums that have a story, but next week's album has a very consistent theme, and I'm curious to see if you'll pick up on that and what some of the different themes on the album are. And I'm excited. I'm excited about that. I'm very excited. So, yeah, I should have wrote more notes for this episode. Sorry for those of you out there that were expecting a really deep dive on the history of this particular album. It's just been so tiring.
Yeah, instead of looking at these notes, we're looking at our notes for all of our classes.
Looking at so many notes right now. But the Christmas break is coming up, and next semester, I'm hoping to have a pretty relaxing time. It's going to be my last semester of school, so hopefully I'll have a lot more time to dedicate to this sort of thing. So, like I said, next week, the Anthropocene Extinction by Cattle Decapitation. In the meantime, before that comes out, you should all check us out on Facebook at Bronze Metalist Podcast. We're also on Twitter at Bronze_Metalist, and we're on Instagram at Bronze Metalist. I should have made that a little bit more consistent, but I tried. If you guys listened to Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation, please leave a comment on any one of those programs. Please, if you're listening to us on Libsyn, check us out on iTunes. If you're checking us out on iTunes, check us out on Libsyn. Leave comments, reviews on any of that stuff. It'll help us out. Spread the word to your buddies.
Yeah, let me know if you guys caught anything that I didn't necessarily.
Yeah. See if the metal acolyte caught anything. Next week, I want you to try and to really Really try and dig.
Okay.
This is going to be your first graded assignment.
Okay.
These last ones, these have been warm-ups. Next week I want some solid interpretation on your part, mister. Okay?
I'll work hard.
All right. Jaryn's going to work hard. I hope you guys out there don't work too hard. Hope you take it easy. But do check out Cattle Decapitations, The Anthropocene Extinction. Check out Suffocation's Effigy of the Forgotten and all of their new stuff. Their new album, Of the Dark Light, came out this summer. It's pretty good. I like it. I like this record. I like this podcast. My name's Kayle.
My name's Jaryn.
This has been Bronze Metalist. Tagline pending. Woo, we were so in sync there. That was perfect. Good job.